Sabrina Carpenter is living proof that it takes 10 years to be an overnight success, and that sometimes the universe is preparing you for your moment, even when you don't know what that moment actually is yet. Because this girl entered a 10-year contract at 14 years old. 5 studio albums with Disney, 2 years per album. That is 10 years of labor as a teenager, which, if you ask me, should be illegal. But we'll get to that later on. And clearly, Disney did not really promote her music in the same way, was not really amplifying her in any way. And in 2017, she even had to go through a lawsuit with her former manager. Eventually, she gets out of this contract, and what is her first big break? She gets on Broadway, playing Katie Heron in the theatrical production of Mean Girls the Musical with Renee Rapp. This was in March of 2020. She does like 2 or 3 shows, and then the global pandemic comes and completely removes the show off Broadway to never come back. Her golden opportunity to escape under the grasp of Disney was literally pried from her fingertips, and she was back to square one. She takes an entire 1-year hiatus, and then after that is when this whole Joshua Bassett and Olivia Rodrigo drama starts to happen. She was literally receiving death threats, slut shaming, all of it. So she goes on hiatus again for another year. Finally, in 2022, she releases Emails I Can't Send, her first album outside of this Disney contract. And in the beginning, the album really did not take off at all. It wasn't until 2023 when things like the nonsense outro started to go viral that really started to put her on the map in a whole new way. Then, in 2024, everything changed with the release of Espresso. It was her first song to ever go #1 on the charts, literally 10 years after she put out her first ever album. And we see how she continues to dominate with things like Please, Please, Please. She's now one of the top 10 artists with the most amount of monthly listeners in the world. And her album, Short and Sweet, is set to come out August 23rd. And it seems like the sky is the limit for Sabrina. But her career did not always look that way. At the Variety Hitmakers Award, she described herself as a tortoise and talked about how much it used to piss her off when her mom called her that. Quote, "In moments of frustration, it can always feel like a letdown, but it turns out it's a good thing. I have loved getting to know the mindset of a slow rise." Understanding the story of Sabrina Carpenter is understanding the beauty of a slow rise. In an age of the internet, almost every month you see how people rapidly rise to success and then disappear off of your feeds in a few months again, only to never be seen. There is beauty in the slow rise, beauty in the hard work, the determination, the grit, and the 10 years sometimes it can take to hone your craft so that way when you do get your moment, you are ready for it. In this week's episode, we're going to discuss the rise of Sabrina Carpenter, how she got to where she is today, how 2024 completely changed her life, and where we think she's going to go from here. Welcome back to Nikki at Night. My name is Nicky.reardon, and I'm so excited to be here. This is episode 4, which is crazy. You guys showed so much love on the last 2, which is insane. I could not believe it. I'm still honestly flabbergasted. Like every week, it doesn't feel real to me. So thank you. And after doing like the first episodes on Chapel and then Charlie, it just felt right to talk about Sabrina next. Like I feel like anytime I discuss pop music with anybody right now, all they want to talk about is like these 3 and how much their careers have just gone from like 0 to 100 so rapidly. And how interesting it is that they're all having this like massive breakout moment, yet have been working at this for 10 years in most cases. And these stories are so fascinating to document to me. And I'd even made a video about this on the past and it did crazy good. And people were like so enamored by this story, and I loved talking about it. And I really wanted to go deeper now because one, when I made that video, that was even like before the release of Espresso, before the release of Please, 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 and before the announcement of this next album. So much about her life has changed since then that I felt like it was really worth like revisiting this narrative and seeing how her life has changed and evolved. But also I kind of wanted to like do it as like a bookmark because I think that this next album is really going to, again, like completely redefine her career in whatever way it goes from here. I mean, Espresso to Please, 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 the first 2 singles off this album were #1 and #2 on the Billboard simultaneously. Which is a record I think she holds. I think she's like one of the first female artists to do that ever. To see that happen with just these 2 singles right before we're about to get an album, I think this video will serve as a time capsule almost to see like how much her life has changed. So with that, I wanted to dive in. Also, guys, we have a Spotify account for the podcast. Please give it a follow. Please, it helps me so much. And if you're listening, please get a 5-star rating. Oh my God, Spotify kind of sucks with how they promote your stuff. It literally does not matter unless people give you a rating, and it doesn't matter how many followers you have. It really is unfortunate. So please do it. I will love you forever and kiss you metaphorically through the screen. So with that, let's dive in. Sabrina Carpenter was born in Greensville, Pennsylvania, and at age 10, she started pursuing music. Do you know the story of how Sabrina Carpenter got discovered? Because she got found in 2009, she auditioned for this singing competition called the Next Miley Cyrus Project, which I think was literally on like MileyWorld.com or Miley Cyrus fan page, where essentially it was like a singing competition for kids where the winner was going to get some sort of like experience or audition to be the next Miley Cyrus and be on Disney. And Sabrina Carpenter was one of these kids. You can literally like find her audition tape on the internet still. And she ended up, I think, getting third in this competition. So she didn't even really win fully, but it is put her on the map, and also this ended up getting her discovered by Disney later on, and they bring her on to Girl Meets World, I think 4 years after this. But something that's so fascinating to me is how Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan have both described that one of the biggest reasons they got into music was Hannah Montana. Like, watching Hannah Montana as a 10-year-old is why they are now a globally charting artist in 2024. And it is such a beautiful story to me of how art always inspires more art, and how, you know, once upon a time there was Miley Cyrus singing on TV, inspiring these two young girls. And now that there's, you know, a 10-year-old girl out there right now watching Sabrina and Chappell and thinking like, wow, these people are amazing. I want to be a singer. And one day we're all going to be streaming her music. And we have no idea who that is yet, but she is out there somewhere. And I think that that is like such a beautiful story and such a cool thing to see. At age 14, Sabrina gets cast in Girl Meets World. This show ran from 2014 to 2017. I'm going to be honest, this was very past like my era of Disney. I also think it's important to note that this sort of era, like I think we saw like the holy trinity of like Miley Cyrus, Selena Gomez, Demi Lovato being like the three big Disney stars in the beginning. But this was like kind of when Disney had lost its grip on the ability to manufacture stars in the same way it was. And I think that's also why, you know, if you think about a lot of these people who came from this later generation of Disney, you think Bella Thorne, you think Zendaya, you think Sabrina Carpenter, you think Jenna Ortega, did not have massive singing careers, except Sabrina, who did much more years later, but again, through a different label, not through Disney at all. So she signs this 5-album deal with Disney, Disney's Hollywood Records. And Hollywood Records, like, we don't know exactly what is going on there, but it's just like a lot of people in the past have had problems with it. I mean, you think of like everything that Miley Cyrus went through and like Demi Lovato and all these people. Like, I don't think it's ever been directly stated whether it was these people at Disney or these people at Hollywood Records. Hollywood Records is owned by Disney. It is like the label underneath this Disney conglomerate. So once people got their show, pretty much it was like, you also get this Hollywood Records contract. And they also kind of almost mandated that you did it together. And I think that was maybe part of the possible like weird tension or predatory nature going on there, where you know, they would use it to manipulate these people who maybe they did like 4 seasons of a show but still had 1 or 2 albums in their contract, and are like, okay, if you don't renew your show for 2 more seasons, then we're just not going to promote your album at all. You know what I mean? Like, even if there wasn't a direct thing that they were doing, it seems like there was maybe just some not super ethical ways that they kind of used this to manipulate people into doing things they didn't really want to do anymore. So Sabrina also signs to her first managers in 2011, again, at 12 years old. And then she ended up firing them in 2014. They then take her to court, I think in 2017, like 3 years after, saying that they were owed commissions for her first 2 albums, Eyes Wide Open and Evolution. She later wrote a song called Sue Me, which was a single off of Singular Act 1, about this incident. And again, it's like one of those things where I think people see, oh my God, they were on Disney. This is so great. This must have been their life's so easy. They just get to be famous. And it's like, no, this was a 12-year-old girl who had to sign up for 10 years of labor. Like, one, I don't even think you can conceptualize what 10 years of anything looks like. 10 years ago at 12, you were 2. You were not even verbal. Like, that is insane. To me, it should not be legal to employ minors for this amount of time, especially in entertainment things, like, because it is their brain is not capable of comprehending what that level of work looks like. And even if they really think they want to do it, do you know how much you change from like 12 to 18, nonetheless, like 18 to 22? Like, it is wrong to me. I don't know. And again, I'm not an entertainment lawyer. I can't speak to this. And I understand too that like their parents have to sign off on it, blah, blah, blah. But I just think like we shouldn't be employing children for that amount of time. And also, like, how many more young girls have to continuously go through this? Like we see, or young actors and stuff. Like we saw the Quiet on Set documentary this year. Like, how many more stories like that do we need to get until we just unanimously agree that this is wrong, And then also to have to be sued by her former managers, again, as a 14-year-old girl, like that is so much trauma. I can't even imagine. Like, coming from somebody who had to deal with anecdotal piece of information, like my dad died a few years ago and I had to deal with like the legal stuff of like a funeral and going to all of that. And like, oh my God, dealing with anything legally is a nightmare. And to put a 14-year-old in that position is just like gross to me. It's gross to me. And I really think that we should just not be employing minors in this way. So that's my anecdotal piece of information about working with children. But moving forward, she does, again, 5 albums. It's Eyes Wide Open is her first, Evolution is her second, 2016, then Singular Act 1 in 2018, Singular Act 2 in 2019. She never does a 5th album with Disney, and I believe it's because she got out of the contract early. I'm not sure exactly why. I think, this is my theory, is a lot of times contracts will have like time or term limits in them as well. And I think that she did an album in 2019, so she was set to do something in like 2021 or whatever, but then the pandemic happened and they couldn't make it. So then the contract just ended up expiring. But again, we don't know, but it ended up being a great thing because Emails I Can't Send was her 5th album, and Emails I Can't Send completely changed this girl's life. So in 2021, Sabrina Carpenter signs to Island Records, which is the same record label as like Chappell Roan, Remy Wolf, Shawn Mendes, Demi Lovato. They're under UMG, a pretty big label. And she starts to write Emails I Can't Send. This is a project she releases under Island. I believe the first single off the album was called Skinny Dipping, but I really think she started to hit mainstream awareness with Because I Liked a Boy, and this whole situation that had happened with her and Olivia Rodrigo and Joshua Bassett. And in hindsight, can we talk about it? Well, this is like literally what? Teenagers dating their coworkers. Like, it was blown so ridiculously out of proportion. I truly feel like everybody was a victim in this situation. Like, nobody could escape the shadow of like just the way that the internet consumed this drama of literal teenagers. But again, it's like, I think it was really perpetuated by, it was like, there were 2 people who were on a show together and the show was very popular and they played love interest in the show. And like, and I get why the 13-year-old audience watching that, like, who have never been through like a real relationship and real breakup themselves, like really anchored onto it. But I don't know, like, again, like I really think this girl went through it. She went through it. Like, again, she took 2 years of hiatuses, like, just because of this incident, and how badly it messed her up. And Because I Liked a Boy really spoke to that. Because I Liked a Boy is a lyrical masterpiece describing the feeling of being slut-shamed for loving somebody who had a complicated situation with their ex. Quote, "Everything's derailing, was only trying to hold you close while your heart was failing. It's not internet illusions, just 2 kids going through it. You said I'm too late to be your first love, but I'll always be your favorite. Now I'm a homewrecker, I'm a slut. I got death threats filling up semi-trucks. Tell me who I am, guess I don't have a choice. All because I liked a boy." And one, I think I love the line of like, was only trying to, everything's derailing, was only trying to hold you close while your heart was failing. This is one, like a metaphor for heartbreak, heart's failing, but also was Joshua Bassett literally went through a heart attack, like got a heart attack, and was hospitalized because of the amount of like times he was being mobbed and like the criticism he faced online, and how that wasn't really publicized in the media the same way. Like Driver's License was this huge song. And again, I don't think I blame Olivia Rodrigo for that. I don't think there was any way she could have known that like people would take it as far as they did. And at the end of the day, it was, she went through a relationship and she wrote a song about the end of that relationship, as 99.9% of music artists do. But it went, again, it literally, everything was derailing. Like it went off the rails. It became a situation that literally everybody lost control over. And I think this song also just like really showed the power of Sabrina's vocals for the first time, and like in a way that, like you really felt the sorrow and how badly she just wanted to be over this, yet she couldn't move past it because the internet wouldn't let her. And I think too, like this is a lot of people discovering Sabrina the artist for the first time. They knew Sabrina the Disney star, but Sabrina the artist was really, I think, born with Because I Like a Boy. And then after that, what's interesting about Emails I Can't Send is the album like did not really pick up crazy in the beginning. Like if you even watch her tour, like the official tour for Emails I Can't Send, they're very small venues, like especially compared to what she's doing now. But the reason the album started to pick up was because of the nonsense outros. Like she was doing a different outro at every single show and was getting so much virality on TikTok from people just recording them and thinking it was absolutely hilarious. And again, it's this expectation variation strategy I talked about in the last episode, where the reason Sabrina Carpenter went so viral is this music strategy called expectation variation, where with the nonsense outros, it's if you want people to pay attention to something, you have to set an expectation, right? Like they have to know something is going to be there. So for that, there will be a nonsense outro, right? There's going to be something new at the end of this song. However, there has to be some sort of variation to it so that it is interesting and that people actually want to watch it, right? Because if the outro is the same for every single show, anybody who's been to a show before or anybody who's seen a video on TikTok will not watch it twice, right? But the second you're like, I'm setting the expectation, but the expectation has a variation, that is what goes viral, right? I think another perfect example of this was like way early. I remember Justin Bieber when he did like the One Less Lonely Girl thing, and he would like, you always knew when he played that song, he was gonna like bring some random girl up from the audience and serenade her, but they didn't know who the girl was going to be and how she was going to react and blah, blah, blah. So that was the expectation. And then the variation was like who it was. And you see how like much that did for his career, how much this did for Sabrina Carpenter's career. And I think honestly, in general too, like one of the smartest things we're seeing artists do today is having these like on stage gimmicks, like really coming up with something that they do specifically at the live show and nowhere else. Like someone who has done it really well, Renee Rapp, is like almost in between songs. Sometimes she'll do like crowd work, like stand-up comedy. Like she just kind of like holds the mic and starts talking to people and like just picks on random people in the audience and is cracking jokes at them. And so often I feel like that is the thing that I see going viral for her. Like people are talking about like what it's like to be at her show. And that makes people want to go to the show specifically because that is an experience they can only get by buying the concert ticket, right? Like just recording videos of you singing is like, oh, cool, I like the song. It's cool to see it live, blah, blah, blah. But you are not giving them a piece of value that can only be seen live in concert. And that's why I think the nonsense outros did so well. It's why the, Renee Rapp doing like stand up, blah, blah, blah did so well. It's why, again, this Justin Bieber, One Less Lonely Girl did so well. I think that's like a really important strategy we're seeing as like the music industry is becoming more visual, as like short form video is rapidly becoming the way we communicate on the internet the most. You have to also do something visually. It can't just be the music itself. There has to be some sort of like fun thing that the audience can feel a part of at the show. I also think the beauty of the nonsense outros was it really felt like the first time like Sabrina used her sense of humor in a way with the music. And that's something she does a lot now. Like when we'll go into later, like talking about Espresso and Please, Please, Please and some of the lyrics there. But like literally to read some of the nonsense outros out loud is like this crowd is giving me all the endorphins. I wish somebody would rearrange my organs. Like no other pop star is just like saying that on stage. You know what I mean? And I think especially too, once she started to like go with Taylor Swift and she opened for Taylor Swift, like that was a really big differentiator for her. Like something I think that comparing like Sabrina to like Gracie Abrams, for example, both artists, young girls around the same age, both open for Taylor Swift. But very different career directions. And I think what is smart about what Sabrina did is like saying something like rearrange my organs is something Taylor Swift would never do, right? She's very family friendly. She tends to be a lot more PG. Her shows are very PG. They're designed to be that way. Sabrina's are not. And I think this gave her that audience and like exposure to this size, but she also didn't fall into the trap of being like just a Taylor Swift dupe almost. You know what I mean? Like it was clear that she had a different POV, a different sense of humor. The themes of her songs were going to be different than the things Taylor Swift was singing about. And I think that ended up being very helpful to her early on, where she didn't become known as like Taylor Swift's opener. She became known as Sabrina Carpenter. And I think that was super, super important for how she starts to take off, because the Eras tour was like really just like put her on the map in a whole new way. I think it was one of those things where like people just finally saw the talent with her own eyes. I think it was also so fascinating to see her on a stadium tour, because before this, Sabrina Carpenter had never done a stadium tour, but she is so talented. She has so much charisma on stage. She like just controls the audience in a way, and you see these like millions of people that are just like enamored with her. And what's crazy is they're technically not even there for her, right? Like she's the opener for somebody else. But I think just like seeing that, like seeing like, oh, if you put the girl in this setting, she can do what she needs to do. She can sing. She has the vocals. She has the performance. And like, even we saw things when like the feather dance, you know, where she did the little kick in the air, like how that started to blow up, you know, like it really started to paint the image of like Sabrina Carpenter, the pop star. Like she really had it all. And I think having this moment to just, you know, be in that setting for the first time gave people the visual of like, oh no, like this girl is a star and like this is waiting to happen. What's interesting about Sabrina Carpenter is she's really the only person who makes positive pop music right now. Like we came from this generation of like the Taylor Swifts, the Olivia Rodrigos, the Billie Eilish, Lana Del Rey's, incredible vocalists, incredible writers, but it is like aggressively sad girl. Like a lot of their songs are about like the end of a relationship or a breakup or heartbreak. And I personally love sad girl music. Like it is my favorite type to consume. However, there was nobody doing like Espresso or Feather. You know what I mean? Like essentially being like, I'm not heartbroken over you. You should be heartbroken over me. Like I'm hot. You were lucky to have me in the first place. And I really think like very early on, Ariana Grande, like that was something she really differentiated herself with. Again, coming from that same generation of artists where she was saying, you know, thank you next and Seven Rings and these songs that were very just like about her feeling good and confident in herself. And pop music straight away from that, it got more sad girly. And I think that was you think of songs blowing up, like specifically Feather and Espresso, two songs that just like really charted so fast. I think it's because no one was singing, like no one was speaking to that feeling of being a young girl. How I feel like your teenage girl years is either you feel so depressed and miserable or like invincible on top of the world, and there is no in between. You know, you think everybody loves you and everybody's obsessed with you, or everybody hates you and you are anxious and insecure. And like we've had so much of this half of that equation, you know, of people writing about that emotional depth of that, but nobody is just talking about, you know, the girly pop and like just feeling of endorphins and feeling lighter like a feather, you know what I mean? And writing jokes into their music. And that I think is really what, again, differentiated Sabrina's sound, again, especially from a Taylor. Like Feather is not a song I feel like Taylor would ever do, or Nonsense is not a song that Taylor would ever do. It's just, it's Sabrina. Like that's more her. It is this positive pop. It is this, you are in love with me, you want me, and everybody's obsessed with me. And it worked, right? Everybody did become obsessed with her. So it's such a fun and interesting thing to think about. And again, I like, you know, anything in pop culture or media, popularity swings like a pendulum. You know what I mean? The second one thing is becomes popular, everybody starts to do it, and then it becomes oversaturated and overdone, and then people start to crave something else. And I think so much of being a good artist is noticing that. Noticing when the pendulum is swinging too much towards one side, and that there is now this entire, open realm for someone else to step in and do the opposite thing. Like, again, talking about a Chapel Roan, I think of so much how these early 2000s was these crazy music videos and people like Lady Gaga that were just so camp and aggressive, or early Katy Perry, and Miley Cyrus Bangers tour, how much it was theatrics production and we loved it. And then that really started to blow, completely calm down in the later 2010s. And then now we have a Chapel Roan who's dressed as the Statue of Liberty at Gov Ball and Mary Antoinette at Lollapalooza in Chicago. And people eat it up, you know what I mean? And it's identifying the swinging of that pendulum, that there was nobody doing that and that they wanted to step in and be the first person to do that again. And going back to the Eras tour too, and just this being her first stadium tour in general, there are two things that I think were really vital about this. One, it was a global tour. She was on, I think, the South American leg of the Eras tour, and that gave her so much exposure to a global audience. I think people don't realize that Disney Channel had a very strong grasp over America and youth in America and Western audiences, but it was not a global phenomena in the same way. So, and building a global audience as a musician is very, very hard to do, but very, very important. One of the beauties of music as a factor of entertainment is that it is global. There's tons of people in America who listen to K-pop and Latin music. There's tons of people in Latin America that are listening to, English-speaking pop stars. And Sabrina getting access, I think, to that global audience through this tour really helped her, again, expand in a much faster way. And again, when you just look at these videos on stage, it is such a proof of it takes 10 years to be an overnight success, because this is her first stadium tour, also the largest tour in history. There's literally never been a tour of this size ever. And she is such a natural. It looks like it's her tour. It looks like she was meant to be on that stage. And she would have never been able to do that if this was in 2014 when she was a teenager and released her first album, right? She would not have had that stage presence. She would not have had these vocals. She would not have had this choreography. She would not have had this aesthetic and visual branding that she has started to develop. It took 10 years to hone that. It took 10 years to land on that. But once she got the opportunity, it went crazy. She ran with it, and it completely exploded her career in a way that she couldn't even have imagined at that time. And again, I think that's when you're thinking about these 10 years to be an overnight success stories, think about that. Think about how it was preparing her for all this time. And had this happened, had Sabrina Carpenter been an opener for Taylor Swift in 2015, I don't think she would have had the same success she had today. But it was meant to happen with Emails I Can't Send. It was meant to happen after these nonsense outros went viral. It was meant to happen after she had become this incredible vocalist. And that, again, is think about that. You are being prepared for something, even if you don't fully know what that thing is yet. But also just talking about this visual branding in general, that is, I think, another element of when Sabrina really found her craft with Espresso and just developing this visual brand. Number one, it talks about, again, this color theory that I always talk about of how aligning yourself with something that people see in their everyday life makes you extremely more memorable, because then it becomes just your version of that, right? Anytime you see that sky blue, you think of Sabrina Carpenter, or you talk about Charlie XCX with Brat, perfect example, right? Anytime somebody sees that Brat green color now, they think of Charlie XCX and how it created all these memes that went viral. It created these, Kamala Harris memes. And anytime somebody sees anything green, there's an opportunity to take a picture of it and post about it and say Brat. And people do that. And that was something that Sabrina did, again, really well with just talking about this Coachella performance. Even when she released Espresso, the entire set is spray painted this blue color. Her entire outfit is painted this blue color. It was a very intentional branding decision to now align with this color blue. Also, she has the little heart cutouts and stuff that she was doing. They're actually custom for Love pieces, which is a designer. And she started to really brand into this this branding of being a shameless flirt and being overtly sexual but not being afraid to do it. and owning her sexuality in that way and in ways that women in media are typically not allowed to do. And then she started wearing all these clothes with the little hearts on them. And then she started being able to release merch with all this stuff on it. Or even just like the little short skirt and high heels, like the chunky heel. It's almost like if somebody said, I'm dressing up as Sabrina Carpenter for Halloween, without them even describing it, you would know what it is, right? It's like the blonde hair, it's like the overt blush, it's the little mini skirt, it's the boots, it's the baby blue. Like the fact that you could, like in an instant, have some sort of visual just because somebody said that, I think is a really clear indicator of like great, strong branding. And I also think it really went to show that like she doesn't conform to trends, she defines them. And she really started to lean into this almost like 50s aesthetic. Like if you look at the music video for Espresso and Please, 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 and just the hairstyle she's been doing, the makeup style she's been doing, it's very like, you know, Americana-y, like this, 1950s type of aesthetic. And that is something, like Lana Del Rey has kind of done that, but not in this like girly pop sense. She's a bit more like retro-y Americana, Midwest Americana, or very like Jackie Kennedy, you know what I mean? Like quiet luxury type. But what Sabrina found was like a different subsect of that. And I think it now, again, the way she started to incorporate these more retro sounding beats and being more reminiscent of that type of sound is like, it's creating this visual branding that now matches like the music. And that, again, it creates this like memorable aspect. It makes the music videos have this coherent story. It makes her performances have this coherent story. It makes it anytime she goes to like a runway or a show or whatever, you can see an outfit and just be like, oh, like that's so Sabrina Carpenter. You know what I mean? And that is like a really hard thing to craft, but once she did, it absolutely changed. And again, Espresso as a song just completely changed her life. And I think it's because she really finally narrowed down her formula as an artist. And in an interview with Hot Ones, she even talked about how she likes to write her songs almost like a stand-up comedy. Like she feels like every song has to have like a setup and a joke and a punchline, and how sometimes her lyrics are extremely playful and honestly kind of nonsense, no pun intended. But that's what makes them fun and pop and interesting, right? Like even just saying like, that's not me espresso. It doesn't really make sense. It's like not proper English. You know what I mean? But we know what it means. It's like that me espresso is like that feeling of like rush and endorphins and like, oh, you just feel so good to be around me, like after you would an espresso shot. Or even just things like, I know I Mountain Dew it for you, or that morning coffee brewed it for you. Move it up, down, left, right, oh, switch it up like Nintendo. That's that me espresso. Like, it's so dumb, like but in a way that's like intentional and self-aware, and it's meant to just be witty and funny. Again, it's like there's a setup and a punchline and a joke. Like morning coffee brewed it for you. Move it up, down, left, right, oh. So she's like, is she talking about like dancing in her ass? And then she says, switch it up like Nintendo. So it's like a stupid pun that's like talking about also a video game controller. You know what I mean? Like a double entendre there. And it's again, it's like it's so nonsensical, but it's fun. It's in like very euphoric and it's funny. And that again, I think is when she really hit her stride. Like she is a girly pop girl. Like that's how she looks. That's the type of song she likes to make. It's the way she sings. Like it works so well for her. And nobody was doing this positive pop. Again, you know what I mean? Like a song like Driver's License or Vampire by Olivia Rodrigo, to compare the two, is very like, talking about heartbreak and these feelings of being used and these very deep emotional things. And that's so important. But what's also important is having fun and feeling good about yourself and feeling the sense of confidence. And I think when I think of Sabrina Carpenter's music, confidence is just the perfect word. Like every song really feels like she has this unwavering sense of self that makes people so drawn to her and want to be like her, or want to be with her, or be her friend, whatever. Like it really built this image of who she is. Also, Please, 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 I think was completely changed Sabrina's life as well for a few reasons. One, I think after the success of Espresso and it being her first ever #1 song, people were skeptical of, is she just a one-hit wonder because she was just on tour with Taylor Swift? You know what I mean? And again, I think Please, Please, Please was proof. One, no, I'm actually going to release a song that's not even just going to do as well, but better than occupy the #1 and #2 spot on the Billboard charts at the same time. But it also like really showed her, again, like honing this style. The music video has this like very retros 50 aesthetic, the fashion, the makeup looks. The beat is this very like retroist. It's again nailing down this like sense of wit that she has in her writing, where it's meant to be funny. Again, this setup and punchline. It's like, you know, don't embarrass me, motherfucker. Like, you know, it's a joke. Like, she is literally trying to get you to laugh by doing that. And no other artist really writes music like that. Almost like to have the sense of like comedic relief in the middle of a song is so interesting to me, but it's what makes her so unique. Again, I think authenticity is being rewarded in music now more than it has ever before. It's why you see the rise of people like Chapel Roan when she has this like crazy visual look. Then you see somebody like Sabrina Carpenter who's leaned into this, you know, branding of being like overtly sexual and not being apologetic for her sexuality. And then Charlie, who's like, you know, being like a dirty party, sweaty party girl and loving it. And it's Brat Summer and she owns it. And it's like, those are so uniquely three distinct point of views in music, but they are so who they are as people. Like, you listen to an interview with either one of them and you just understand how that is truly to their core, like what they like and what they're interested in. And regardless of whether they had music or not, they would be like that, you know? And that I think is so important to see. Like, we really came from this 2010s era of music where it was like a pop star factory, you know? Like, we had like the Britney Spears and then the Disney pipeline generation. And then, you know, these just huge artists who have been around for so long. And nobody was, we went through almost like 5 years almost where it felt like we did not get a single new artist. I feel like literally from 2015 to 2020, the only like big new mainstream artist we got was like Billie Eilish. Like, she was like the only one who really broke through in that time. And it's because the industry was so focused on like rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat of what was working. And now it is the opposite. Authenticity is what sells. People want somebody that feels different and new and fresh. We got tired of it. We are tired of it. We like these stories. We like the Chapels, the Sabrinas, the Charlies. Like, they are people giving us something new. They are, as my friend Michaela always like to say, is giving us source material. Like, they are creating new source material that people will draw inspiration from later on. And going back to just like Sabrina and Please, 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 I think that this really, again, one, it proves she was not a one-hit wonder artist. The fact that she could hit number one and number two at the same time, now is over 80 million monthly listeners, is like absolutely unreal. She became a top 10 artist in the world from these two songs. Espresso is already at almost 1 billion streams. I think it's 900 million in a few months since April. Literally 4 months to get 1 billion streams on a song is unreal. Unreal. Please, 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 I think is at 500 mil. So we'll hit 1 billion by the end of the year. And what's fascinating now is I think the next thing Sabrina has to prove to people is that she can be an album artist. One of the most interesting things to me about this rise of Sabrina Carpenter was how she never really took off for an album. Like, it was first the Nonsense outros went super, super viral. Then it was like Feather and performing on the Eras tour, and the little Feather dance went super, super viral. And then it was Espresso that went crazy, number one song. Then Please, Please, Please went number one song. But like, never did the album of Emails I Can't Send pick up. And comparing that to like a Chapel Roan, you know, we saw how like Good Luck Babe came out, but then after that on the charts was like Red Wine Supernova, Hot to Go, Feminine Aminon, Super Graphic Ultra Modern Girl, Casual. Like that, it, like, she had her hit, but it created a wave for this album to take off. For some reason, that never happened to Sabrina, which is unreal because Emails I Can't Send is such a good album. It is an album. Oh my God. If I can give you 2 recs to listen to after this video, please. Number 1, Read Your Mind. Okay. I don't know why that song didn't take off. It's like such a Sabrina pop song. It's like Feather equivalent. It's so good. It's so good. Please listen to it. And then number 2 is Vicious. It's like a little bit more like pop punk rocky. Like, I would equate it to her sort of like Good For You of Olivia type sound, but not that far. But I love, it's the song that has like this slow rise to exposition and like a screaming ending, kind of like Billy Happier Than Ever-esque in terms of like the way it crescendos, but not stylistically similar. It's a lot more pop. But it's such a good song. Again, please listen to these 2. It will change your life. What is going to be interesting about Sabrina's future is Short and Sweet has to prove that she can be an album artist. And I think it absolutely will. Again, I mean, literally the first 2 singles from this like from the album are number 1 and number 2. And her Emails I Can't Send is an incredible album, but it's just interesting that like to the vast majority of the world, it did not pick up in that way. You know, like I was even looking, I think, at numbers before this, and like her top 5 songs are like Espresso, Please, 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 Feather, Nonsense, and Because I Liked a Boy. But the gap between 4th and 5th place is 400 million streams. And they're all off the same album. In fact, Because I Liked a Boy even came out first. And again, that was just so interesting to me how this album never took off in that way. Like, we never saw it to become a charting album. So I'm very interested to see what happens with Short and Sweet in that way. And I'm also excited because I think she's going to play it at Outside Lands because it is next weekend. And she has no other scheduled performances until the release of the album. And she's only released 2 singles so far. Most of the time, artists do 3 singles. How else is she going to promote the album unless she is going to leak it? So then people start posting it and posting audios from it this next weekend. So stay tuned. I literally think we're going to get the first snippets of Short and Sweet next weekend. And I will be at Outside Land. So if any of you guys are there, please come say hi. It would literally make my day. And the last thing I think that's interesting is could Sabrina Carpenter get a Best New Artist nomination at the Grammys? Technically, yes. In terms of the criteria it is required, all that it has to be is 1, you've never won a Grammy in your life, which she hasn't. And then 2, was this the year in which you permeated the mainstream? That is the way that they describe this. That is why someone like Victoria Monet was able to win last year, despite being an artist for 10 years. But it was just, last year with songs like On My Mama that put her on the map to a whole new level. And by definition, that is what happened to Sabrina this year, right? Espresso and Please, 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 again, the top 2 songs in the world at one point. But I could see them not wanting to submit her for Best New Artist for a few reasons. One, she's under the same record label as Chappell Roan. And Chappell Roan, I think, is such a shoo-in for Best New Artist, and it would be such a good story for her to go from this really in the trenches of her Midwest town to releasing Midwest Princess to having this explosive year to then getting a Best New Artist win. I just think that narrative would be so beautiful, and they would love it, and it would do a lot for her career. And then 2, I just think that they probably want to kind of brand Sabrina as being a bigger artist than that. By monthly listeners, she's a top 10 artist in the world. That is unreal to happen. For somebody who have never run a Grammy, and for that to have happened in the span of under a year is insane. And I think they probably want to paint the image that Sabrina is not new. She's not a new artist anymore. She's been here. It just took you all this long to figure it out. And that she is an artist that could win Song of the Year, that could win Record of the Year, that could win Album of the Year. I mean, Short and Sweet isn't even out yet, but that I think is I could see it. Again, I don't know, because it's also tough, because it's if she entered, I feel she would just have to win, right? She in terms of just raw streaming data, she eclipses every other potential nominee 3 times over. But I think branding wise, she just might be I don't want to do, I don't want to be a new artist. I'm Sabrina Carpenter. I'm not a new artist anymore. In conclusion, if you're thinking about Sabrina Carpenter's story as a whole, I think it is just to understand that there is so much time and adversity that is required to get to this level. Again, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success, right? She had to go through 10 years of contracts as a teenager. She had to get sued by a former manager. She had to get publicly shamed for being slut shamed, essentially. She had to get death threats. She had to, land a major Broadway role and they get kicked off Broadway 3 days later. But it prepared her for this. It was meant to happen in this way. And again, when she talks about being a tortoise, it wasn't that she wasn't going to get there. It was that it had to happen in her own time and in her own way. And now that it has happened, it feels again, this just wave of momentum where every time you think it's going to crash, it gets even bigger. And that is such a beautiful narrative. And I guess to any of the aspiring artists or aspiring actors, anybody out there, if you're aspiring to something creative, think about that. Think about that you're being honed and you're learning stuff, and that these things are only losses if you make them one. Because if you don't view it as a loss, it's a learning experience. And I think that is just my story for the lore of Sabrina Carpenter. I have no idea what I want to do for next week's episode, but I don't know. I just felt right to do the 3 pop girlies first. I don't think I only want to talk about pop music all the time, but it was just it felt right to me to do it in this way and the way it happened. And you guys seem to really have loved it. So please subscribe to the channel. We're so close to 10K subs. That's fucking insane. Please follow the Spotify account and give it a 5-star rating. If you're listening, please rate it now. Please, you will do so much for me. I will hug you and buy you cookies. And I'll see you all next week. Bye.